My husband spent our 10th anniversary weekend with his work friend while I was sick with COVID, then gaslit me saying I was paranoid. I didn't argue, but sent him on a spa getaway where he found divorce papers wrapped as a gift. I still remember staring at the positive COVID test like it was some kind of cruel joke the universe was playing on me. 2 pink lines glaring back at me 3 days before our 10th anniversary weekend at the Ritz-Carlton in Laguna Niguel, the trip we'd booked 6 months ago, the one I'd spent weeks planning down to the couple's massage and sunset dinner reservation. Well, that's just perfect timing, I said to nobody, my voice already scratchy from the sore throat that had woken me at 3 a.m. I shuffled back to our bedroom where Mark was still sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that our anniversary plans were about to implode. I didn't want to wake him with my coughing, so I grabbed my pillow and retreated to the guest room, falling into a fitful, fever dream sleep. When I woke again, my phone showed 10:47 a.m. and 3 missed calls from my editor about the manuscript deadline I was definitely going to miss now. Mark was standing in the doorway in his Brooks Brothers work shirt, holding a glass of water and some Tylenol. "So what's the verdict?" he asked, keeping a careful distance. I held up the test without a word. His face fell, but not in the way I expected. It wasn't disappointment about my health. It was something else. Something that sent a tiny alarm bell ringing in the back of my fever-addled brain. Shit. "That's unfortunate timing," he said, setting the water and pills on the nightstand. "How bad do you feel?" "Like I got hit by a truck driven by an angry rhino," I croaked. "I'm so sorry about our trip, Mark. I know how much you were looking forward to it." He was quiet for a moment, fiddling with his Apple Watch. "Yeah, about that. I was thinking. The reservation is non-refundable, and you're going to be quarantined anyway." I blinked, waiting for him to finish the thought, though I already knew where it was headed. Janet from work needs to go over the Henderson proposal with me, and she mentioned she could use a break, too. What if I still went and used the reservation? You'd just be sleeping here anyway, right? I'd be back Sunday night. Janet from work, of course. The same Janet he'd been texting at odd hours for months. The same Janet whose name made his eyes light up when she called. The same Janet he swore was just a colleague when I'd casually asked about her 3 months ago. I should have called him out right there. I should have thrown the glass of water at his perfectly pressed shirt. Instead, I felt something cold and hard crystallize in my chest. "Sure," I said, my voice steady, despite the fever. "No sense wasting the reservation." His eyebrows shot up in surprise. He'd clearly expected resistance. "Really? You're okay with it?" "Why wouldn't I be?" "It's work," I said, taking a sip of water to soothe my raw throat. "Just bring me back one of those little bottles of fancy lotion from the spa." He smiled, relieved, and promised to check on me before he left. Then he was gone, already texting someone as he walked out. 3 guesses who. I lay back on the pillows, my head pounding, and thought about the fact that my husband of 10 years was about to spend our anniversary weekend at a luxury beach resort with another woman while I suffered through COVID alone. Updated. Wow, I didn't expect this post to blow up overnight. Thanks for all the support and advice. To clarify, yes, I have evidence beyond just suspicion, and no, I haven't confronted him directly yet. Should I just file for divorce immediately, or is my plan for sweet revenge worth the wait? Marriage doesn't crumble overnight. Looking back, I can pinpoint exactly when things started changing between us, like watching a slow-motion car crash I somehow missed while it was happening. A year ago, Mark started coming home later from work, always with the same excuse. The Henderson Project is killing me. The Henderson Project became our unwelcome third roommate, stealing dinners, weekends, and eventually, our connection. Mark and I met in grad school, me pursuing my MFA in creative writing, him in business administration. We were those annoyingly perfect opposites attract types. I was all creative chaos and emotional intelligence. He was structure, ambition, and 5-year plans. Somehow it worked. He kept me grounded. I taught him to see the beauty in unplanned moments. The first 5 years of marriage were everything I'd dreamed of. We bought our craftsman-style home in a neighborhood we could barely afford, painted every room ourselves, and christened each one with wine and laughter. Mark supported my writing career through the lean years, celebrating wildly when I landed my first book deal for a psychological thriller that paid enough to let me quit my teaching job. Then he got the promotion at Wexler and Associates, and everything shifted. The Mark who used to spend Sundays making Dutch baby pancakes while I read him excerpts from my drafts transformed into someone who checked emails during dinner and took calls during movies. And then came Janet. I first heard her name at a company holiday party 8 months ago. She was new, ambitious, and apparently brilliant according to Mark's boss, who'd cornered me by the eggnog to sing her praises. "Janet's the kind of talent we need more of," he'd said, completely oblivious to how I'd stiffened when I spotted her across the room, laughing at something my husband said, her hand resting just a touch too long on his arm. She was everything. I wasn't. Polished in that corporate way with her perfect blowout and Burberry trench coat, all sharp angles and sharper ambition. I'm not the jealous type, never have been, but something about the way Mark looked at her sent a warning flare through my chest. She and Mark make quite the team, his boss continued, oblivious to my discomfort. They stay so late working sometimes I have to kick them out. Later that night, I'd asked Mark about her casually. So, Janet seems nice. You work with her often? Sometimes, he'd said, suddenly very interested in loosening his tie. She's good at her job. Why? Just curious, I'd replied, watching him. A beat too long. The texts started a week later. They were always about work, at least the ones I accidentally glimpsed when his phone lit up on the coffee table. But soon Mark started taking his phone with him everywhere, even to the bathroom, and stepping outside to take calls, his voice dropping to that private register that made my writer's instinct prickle with suspicion. I'm not proud of what I did next, but after 20 years of crafting characters and their secrets, I've developed a sixth sense for lies. One night while Mark was in the shower, I checked his location history. There it was, frequent stops at a Starbucks halfway between our house and the office, nowhere near his usual route. Sometimes for 30 minutes, sometimes for 2 hours. Just coffee meetings, he'd said when I asked casually about his new caffeine habit. And because I wasn't ready to face what I suspected, I pretended to believe him. By month 6, Mark had missed 3 date nights for work emergencies. Our sex life had dwindled to occasional, perfunctory encounters that left me feeling more alone than satisfied. I told myself it was just a rough patch, that all marriages go through phases, that his distraction was temporary. Then came the weekend trip to visit his college roommate in San Diego. I might have believed it if I hadn't seen Janet's Instagram story, quickly deleted, but not before I caught a glimpse of a familiar watch on a wrist against a hotel balcony backdrop, with the same skyline view Mark had texted me. I still said nothing. Call it a writer's curiosity or a masochist's patience, but I wanted the full story before I confronted the betrayal. I started documenting everything in a password-protected file on my laptop titled Next Book Research. Texts, location discrepancies, credit card charges for dinners I never ate. The week before our anniversary, I overheard a phone conversation that confirmed everything. Mark thought I was napping, knocked out by my pre-COVID flu symptoms, but I'd gotten up for tea and stopped cold in the hallway when I heard him speaking in that low, intimate voice I once thought was reserved for me. I can't wait for this weekend, he said softly. 10 years deserves a proper celebration, don't you think? She has no idea what I've planned. I stood there, teacup clutched in my trembling hand, as my husband laughed at something Janet said. On the other end of the line, no, she won't suspect anything. She trusts me completely. The cruelest part wasn't the affair. It was hearing my husband, the man who'd once held me through my father's funeral, who'd read every draft of my first novel, who'd promised to grow old with me on a porch swing somewhere with a view, weaponize my trust against me. So when COVID came knocking 3 days before our anniversary, I didn't see it as a disaster. I saw it as an opportunity. As Mark packed for our anniversary weekend, whistling like he'd won the lottery, my mind was already mapping out the perfect third act to our marriage. One worthy of the psychological thrillers I'm known for writing. Do you need anything before I go? He asked, zipping his Louis Vuitton weekender, the one I'd given him for his birthday last year. More Gatorade? Soup? I'm fine, I said, pulling my bathrobe tighter. Just go have a good time. Don't worry about me. He hesitated, guilt flickering across his face for approximately half a second before relief took over. If you're sure, I'll check in later. The moment his Tesla pulled out of the driveway, I dragged myself to my office and opened my laptop. Time to finalize my masterpiece. First order of business, confirmation. I logged into our shared cell phone account and checked his real-time location. The blue dot was moving steadily toward the coast, toward the Ritz-Carlton, where we should have been celebrating a decade of what I thought was love. Then I texted my best friend, Layla, who happens to work for my attorney. Operation Karma is a go. Send the papers. You sure about this? She texted back immediately. Never been more sure of anything in my life, I replied, while waiting for Mark's inevitable, I've arrived safely, text. He's nothing if not predictable in his performative thoughtfulness. I called the hotel. Ritz-Carlton Laguna Niguel. How may I assist you today? A cheerful voice answered. Hi, this is Michelle Wexler, I said, using Mark's last name as I always did for reservations. My husband is checking in today for our anniversary package, but I'm not feeling well and will be joining him tomorrow instead. I'd like to arrange a special surprise for when he arrives. Of course, Mrs. Wexler, we'd be happy to help. What did you have in mind? I'd like to have a gift waiting in the room. I'll have it delivered this afternoon. Could you make sure it's placed prominently? Absolutely. We can put it on the bed with rose petals if you'd like. That's part of your anniversary package. I smiled through my congestion. Perfect. Thank you. Next, I called my editor to explain the deadline extension I needed. Sophia has been my editor for 3 books now, and she's more friend than colleague at this point. Take all the time you need, she said after I explained my situation. All of it. Actually, this gives me an idea for your next book. Already ahead of you, I said, glancing at my notebook filled with plot points for what would become my most personal novel yet. Working title, The Anniversary Gift. Mark's text came through at 2:13 p.m. Checked in, the room is amazing. Wish you were here, how are you feeling? I waited exactly 17 minutes to respond, just long enough to seem distracted but not suspiciously unresponsive. About the same. Enjoy the ocean for me. My phone immediately lit up with his reply. Will do. Getting some work done by the pool. Now. Talk later. Work by the pool. Right. I pulled up Instagram and sure enough, there was Janet's latest story. A boomerang of 2 mimosa glasses clinking with the ocean in the background. No faces, nothing incriminating to the casual observer, but the Ritz-Carlton's distinctive blue pool umbrellas were visible in the reflection of her sunglasses. The courier arrived at 3:30 p.m. with the manila envelope from Layla. Inside were the divorce papers, meticulously prepared over the past 2 months, citing irreconcilable differences. I didn't go for the jugular with allegations of infidelity. I didn't need to. The prenup we'd signed had a fidelity clause that would speak for itself once the evidence was presented. I placed the papers in a beautiful cream-colored gift box from Neiman Marcus, the kind reserved for expensive purchases. On top, I placed a card in my neatest handwriting. Happy anniversary, Mark. Here's to new beginnings. Beneath the papers, I added a USB drive containing copies of everything. The location history showing his many coffee meetings with Janet, screenshots of text messages I'd seen, hotel receipts from his business trips, and photos a private investigator friend had taken as a favor. Bless Lisa and her zoom lens. The final touch was a printed copy of an email from my publisher confirming my new book deal, a memoir about rebuilding after betrayal. By 4 p.m., another courier was on their way to the Ritz with my special delivery. My plan was now in motion, timed perfectly for maximum impact. The gift would arrive while Mark and Janet were enjoying the couple's massage originally booked for us, to be placed on the turned-down bed with rose petals and champagne. They'd return to the room, flushed with relaxation and false security, only to find the beautifully wrapped bomb I'd planted. I took a NyQuil and collapsed back into bed, my COVID symptoms providing a strange comfort. For the first time in months, I slept without the weight of suspicion and unspoken accusations crushing my chest. Around 8 p.m., my phone started vibrating incessantly. First with texts. Mark. Is this some kind of joke? Mark. Pick up your phone. Mark. You can't be serious. Then came the calls, 7 in a row, each sent to voicemail. I listened to the first one, curiosity winning over self-preservation. What the hell is this? His voice was tight, controlled fury barely contained. Divorce papers? On our anniversary? You couldn't even discuss this with me first? Call me back immediately. The second voicemail abandoned all pretense of control. You set me up. You knew I'd be here with... You planned this whole thing. How long have you been watching me? This is insane, Michelle. You're being paranoid and vindictive. Call me back. By the third message, he'd moved from anger to bargaining. Look, I know how this must look, but it's not what you think. Janet and I are just colleagues. We've been working on a surprise for you, a promotion at the company. That's all this is. Please, just talk to me. Updated. Thanks for all the comments. Yes, I've blocked him now and no, I don't believe his BS about working on a surprise promotion. I've decided to stay at Layla's until everything cools down. Am I wrong for feeling this strange combination of heartbreak and satisfaction? Would you have handled it differently? I switched off my phone completely after the 8th call and took another NyQuil. The next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through the guest room blinds, and my COVID-ravaged body had granted me 12 straight hours of oblivion. When I finally turned my phone back on, it nearly exploded with notifications. 18 missed calls from Mark, 7 from unknown numbers. Janet? Her friends? 26 text messages, and a barrage of emails with subject lines ranging from, please read this, to I can explain everything. I ignored them all and called Layla. How's my favorite soon-to-be ex-wife? She answered on the first ring. Physically miserable, emotionally liberated, I croaked. Is everything in place? Roger had the locks changed an hour ago, and the security system's been recoded. Your stuff is at my place whenever you're well enough to move. Oh, and I had the evidence file uploaded to your attorney's secure server. Layla paused. He showed up here last night, you know? My heart stuttered. Mark came to your place? Around midnight. completely unhinged, kept saying you were mentally unstable and misinterpreting everything. I told him you weren't here and threatened to call the cops. He left, but not before making quite the scene in my front yard. I'm sorry, I said, guilt momentarily piercing through my vindication. Don't you dare apologize. That man is getting exactly what he deserves. She hesitated. Janet was in his car, by the way, waiting. She looked uncomfortable. I laughed, which triggered a coughing fit. I bet she did. Nothing says romance like hunting down your lover's wife after being caught red-handed. After downing some orange juice and more Tylenol, I finally opened Mark's texts, clinical curiosity overriding my better judgment. The messages followed the classic stages of grief. Denial. This is all a misunderstanding. Anger. You've lost your mind. Bargaining. Let's talk about this like adults. Depression. I can't believe you'd throw away 10 years. And finally, around 4 a.m., acceptance. I'll have my things out by the end of the week. What was notably absent was any actual denial of the affair itself. The doorbell rang as I was deleting the last of his messages. I froze, wondering if Mark had ignored the locksmith's handiwork, but the security camera showed a delivery person holding a massive bouquet. The flowers, a gaudy arrangement of stargazer lilies that Mark should have known I'm allergic to, came with a card. I'm sorry for everything, please let me explain. I tossed them straight into the outdoor trash bin. By Monday, my fever had broken, though the cough and fatigue lingered. My phone had been mercifully quiet for 24 hours, leading me to believe Mark had finally gotten the message. Then came the email from an address I didn't recognize. Michelle, I know we've never officially met, but I feel like I need to reach out. Mark told me you were having some emotional difficulties, possibly a nervous breakdown, and that's why you sent those papers. He said your COVID diagnosis had triggered some kind of paranoid episode. I was concerned and wanted to see if you needed help. Janet. The audacity nearly took my breath away. I replied with a single attachment, a photo of them entering the hotel room together, her hand casually resting on his lower back, and the words, I'm getting exactly the help I need, thanks. My attorney will be in touch if you're subpoenaed as part of the proceedings. She never responded. 3 days later, as promised, Mark came to collect his things while I stayed at Layla's, still recovering. My security cameras recorded him and his brother loading boxes into a U-Haul, Mark looking haggard and considerably less polished than usual. News of our separation spread quickly through our social circle. Most friends chose neutrality, the path of least resistance. A few of Mark's work buddies' wives called to tell me he was spinning a story about my COVID psychosis and how I'd always been unstable, poor thing, all those dark books she writes. But for every friend who drifted away, another stepped up in surprising ways. My neighbor Ellen, who I'd barely spoken to beyond pleasantries, dropped off homemade soup and told me Mark had been parking a block away and walking to meet someone in a silver Audi for months. Information she'd never felt was her place to share until now. My publisher called with unexpected news. They wanted to fast-track my memoir, offering an advance that made my eyes water. People connect with authenticity, my agent explained. And frankly, your story is going to resonate with thousands of women who've been gaslit and dismissed. The first few weeks were the hardest. Not because I missed Mark, but because I missed who I thought he was. I mourned the marriage I believed we had, the decades spent building what turned out to be a foundation of sand. I questioned my judgment, my perceptions, wondering how I could have been so oblivious to the truth unfolding right before me. The divorce proceedings moved quickly, thanks to the prenup and Mark's apparent desire to avoid public scrutiny. His initial bluster about fighting the evidence faded once his lawyer reviewed what I had. We settled out of court, a fact that disappointed the more vindictive part of me that had fantasized about reading our text message history aloud to a judge. 6 weeks after our anniversary weekend, I received a final email from Mark. No excuses this time, no accusations, just a simple, I'm sorry I hurt you, I never deserved you. For the first time since this all began, I cried. 1 year later, I'm sitting on the oceanfront balcony of the Ritz-Carlton Laguna Niguel, watching the sunset with a glass of champagne, alone by choice, not by abandonment. My 5th book, The Anniversary Gift, has spent 12 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list, and the film rights just sold to Netflix. The memoir came later, after thousands of women reached out with their own stories of betrayal and resurrection. Mark and Janet lasted 3 months after our divorce was finalized. Turns out relationships founded on deceit rarely survive the harsh light of reality. Last I heard, he'd moved to Chicago for a fresh start. I wish him well, genuinely. Some lessons come at a devastating cost, and I hope he learned his. As for me, I've discovered that endings are just beginnings in disguise. I bought a beach house with my book advance, smaller than our old place but filled with more genuine joy. I adopted a golden retriever named Karma. Yes, I know it's on the nose. But sometimes a writer can't resist a good metaphor. I've made new friends and strengthened bonds with old ones who stood by me. Dating again at 39 feels strange but exhilarating. I'm not rushing into anything, but I've met someone who reads my books, asks thoughtful questions, and actually listens to the answers. We'll see. The waiter arrives with fresh champagne. Is this a special occasion? He asks, noticing my solitary celebration. I smile, watching the last sliver of sun disappear into the Pacific. It's my anniversary. Your husband joining you later? No, I say, lifting my glass in a silent toast to myself. I'm celebrating something different now. The day I chose truth over comfortable lies. The day I started over. He nods, understanding more than I expected. To new beginnings, then. To new beginnings, I echo, taking a sip as the first stars appear above the darkening ocean. Updated. Thank you for following my journey this past year. The support from this community has meant everything. My memoir hits shelves next month, and I'm donating a portion of proceeds to organizations helping women rebuild after divorce. Would you read a book about someone who turned their pain into power, or is it time to close this chapter for good?